Have you ever wondered why most Christians seem so hypocritical? They claim to follow a set of rules, but in reality, they act in completely different ways. They expect you to behave one way, while they themselves do the opposite. They preach lofty principles to others, but quietly break them in their own lives. Somehow, all their rules, principles, and expectations get redefined when it comes to how they actually live. So, why do they break their own rules? Because the very God they worship is a hypocrite himself. He makes rules and then breaks them. And in this video, that's exactly what we are going to dive into. The Bible is very clear. The people of Israel, God's own people, must never copy the practices of other nations. They were commanded to be different, to avoid imitating other religions, rituals, and symbols of their neighbors. In the Old Testament book of Deuteronomy chapter 12 verse 30 to 31, their God Yahweh warns, "Take care that you are not ensnared to follow them. You shall not worship the Lord your God in that way." Again, in the book of Jeremiah chapter 10 verse 2 it says, "Do not learn the way of the nations." The message is unmistakable. Israel's God, Yahweh, wanted his people to be set apart, different from surrounding pagan cultures. But here is the irony. The very heart of Israel's worship, Yahweh's own temple, was decorated with imagery copied directly from those same pagan cultures. And this hypocrisy goes deeper. It was not the people's idea to carve those images in that temple. It was Yahweh's own command. Their God Yahweh ordered 2 giant golden statues of cherubim, each 10 cubits high, with wings stretching from wall to wall. These figures stood directly in front of the Ark of the Covenant, at the very heart of Israel's worship. In other words, Israel's God commanded massive golden images right where his presence was supposed to dwell. These cherubim were not unique to Israel. They were already common in surrounding cultures, Babylon, Assyria, Egypt, where winged guardian creatures stood at temples and palaces. Archaeology shows clearly that Israel was copying, not innovating. In the ancient Near East, cherubim were not angels, they were hybrid guardian creatures similar to Assyrian Lamassu, massive winged bulls with human heads guarding palace gates. In Egypt, sphinxes, part lion, part human, often winged, protecting temples and tombs. In Babylon, winged guardians at sacred entrances. Israel's cherubim were simply another version of these ancient guardian figures. Instead of creating something unique, Yahweh's worship borrowed from the same pagan playbook he supposedly despised. So what happened to the command, "Do not follow the nations"? If it applies anywhere, surely it should apply in the most holy place of the temple, the absolute heart of Israel's worship. Yet, this is exactly where Israel, under Yahweh's command, copied its neighbors most blatantly. The hypocrisy deepens further when we recall another of Yahweh's laws, the second of the 10 commandments. In Exodus chapter 20 verses 4 and 5, Yahweh says, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image, or any likeness of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them." Notice how absolute this is. It doesn't say don't make idols unless I tell you to. It doesn't say only avoid images of false gods. It flatly bans making any likeness of anything in heaven, on earth, or in the waters. Now, this is where the debates usually start. Christians come up with the following excuses. Excuse number 1. They say, "Our God Yahweh only bans idols, not all images." They argue that the cherubim were not idols, so no contradiction exists. But the text says, "You shall not make any likeness of anything in heaven above, or the earth beneath, or in the waters below." Cherubim clearly qualify. If it only meant idols, why not just say don't make idols? Instead, it bans likeness of heavenly and earthly beings altogether. Excuse number 2. Next, Christians argue that the cherubim were symbolic, not idols, mere furniture or visual reminders of God's presence. But the second commandment doesn't hinge on whether people worship them or not. The very act of making images of heavenly beings is the violation. And these were not minor decorations, they were massive golden statues, each 15 feet tall, stretching across the most holy place, the holiest space in Israel. If that doesn't count as religious imagery, what does? So, if don't copy the nations means anything, it should apply to the most holy place. And yet, Solomon's temple was filled with motifs lifted directly from neighboring cultures. 2 enormous golden cherubim stretching wing to wing, walls carved with palm trees and flowers, furniture decorated with lions and bulls, the great bronze basin resting on 12 sculpted oxen. In Ezekiel's vision, cherubim and palms cover the walls. So much for don't copy the nations. Yahweh's temple was essentially a copy and paste of Near Eastern religious art. The Ark of the Covenant itself had 2 golden cherubim on top, where Yahweh was said to dwell between the cherubim. Temple imagery included animals, plants, and mythological figures, all carved and decorated in gold and bronze. So much for no images. Worship relied heavily on sacred objects and images. Excuse number 3. Some Christians try to soften the apparent contradictions by claiming that the second commandment was not about banning images altogether. It only prohibited making idols of foreign gods. In other words, don't make idols of Baal, Moloch, and Asherah. Don't bow to their statues, worship only me. The problem with this excuse is clear. The text of Exodus chapter 20 verse 4 to 5 is broad and absolute. It says, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, on the earth beneath, or in the waters under the earth." That covers heavenly beings, earthly creatures, and anything else, not just foreign gods. Yet, their God Yahweh commanded the Israelites to create cherubim, which were images of heavenly beings, directly violating this prohibition. This excuse tries to rewrite the commandment to fit the action, but it doesn't hold up to the plain reading of the text. The hypocrisy couldn't be clearer. Yahweh bans copying the nations but then copies their temple guardians. Yahweh bans making images but commands golden cherubim. Yahweh condemns idols but demands his own image-based worship. This is not divine consistency. It's human contradiction. Ancient plagiarism dressed up as revelation. The most holy place, the center of Israel's worship, contained figures borrowed from pagan cultures. The command, "Do not follow the nations," was broken by the Bible itself.